Imagine this. A young man walks into court over a minor parking violation. Yet the room falls silent as if a far bigger problem has just entered on two legs. Moments earlier, the courtroom felt like any worn New England morning. A low hum of conversations, papers sliding, the soft clatter of the clerk's keyboard. But when the door opens, that hum flattens. People straighten slightly, unsure why. They don't know the details, but instinctively sense a shift, the way a room tenses when someone walks in carrying the weight of trouble rather than the inconvenience of a ticket. He steps inside with the kind of calm that isn't confidence, but entitlement. The quiet, cold assurance of someone who has never had to adjust himself to a space. Hands in his pockets, shoulders relaxed, eyes forward but not truly looking. He moves as though the court is a hallway he's passing through, not a place where laws matter. A faint accent flickers through when he thanks the bailiff, barely audible, quickly swallowed, as if he's trained himself to iron it out. That only draws more curiosity. Folks who hide pieces of themselves tend to have reasons. Judge Caprio starts the session the way he always does, voice measured, warm, the human tone that calms most people who stand before him. Case number: involving a parking infraction. He stops mid-sentence. His eyes land on a red tag clipped to the paperwork, a small federal marker, the kind placed only when someone is threaded into an ongoing investigation. Not guilty of anything, not charged, but flagged. A flag that never appears without purpose. The clerk's fingers hesitate over the keyboard. Nothing dramatic, just the kind of subtle pause that shows the mind doing quick math. Why is that here? Caprio's expression doesn't harden, but narrows. Not fear, not surprise, but the alertness of a man who has seen enough to know when a story has more pages than the one in front of him. The young man finally lifts his eyes to the bench. He smiles. Not friendly, not sheepish, but as if he knows something the room doesn't. A thin, knowing curl of the lip. Then he leans toward the microphone and says, almost lazily, "Let's move this along, Judge. I've got more important things to do today." A ripple runs through the back rows, a mix of disbelief and offense. Not loud, just the quiet exhale of people who still believe in respecting institutions and bristle when someone dismisses them. Caprio doesn't react immediately. He sets the papers down, folds his hands, and gives the young man a level, steady look. Not anger, but assessment. For the first time in a long while, he allows a small pause to hang in the air. Half a second, but it stretches, gathering weight. When he finally speaks, his voice is low, almost conversational. "You just told me far more than you realize." Several heads in the gallery tilt, sensing the temperature has changed again, that the morning's routine has officially ended, and something far more interesting has begun. The judge glances back to the file. The young man shifts slightly, and for the first time, the calm in his posture looks performed. Caprio closes the folder with care, as though deciding how deep he intends to go. And without raising his voice, he says, "Let's continue." The room breathes in, waiting for the next beat. The moment where this stops being about a parking sign and becomes a story none of them expected when they walked in. Judge Caprio studies the young man for a moment, then revisits the paperwork with a slower, more deliberate rhythm. He reads the name aloud, letting each syllable settle in the air. Artemkrylov. A few people exchange glances, not in recognition, but because the name itself carries an unfamiliar sharpness. The judge flips to the bio section, scanning the lines that fill in the shadows behind the face standing at the podium. 21 years old, born in Boston, American citizen. But the next lines tell a wider story. Father. officially a business consultant, unofficially tied to an old FARA investigation that never fully bloomed, but never disappeared either. The kind of half-buried case that leaves a lingering odor, the kind communities whisper about long after the news cycle moves on. Nothing proven, nothing formal, yet everyone seemed to know something. And the son? Well, people had watched him grow up with the sort of swagger that rarely comes from achievement. Instead, it came from lineage, the inherited belief that consequences apply to other families. Caprio keeps reading. The charge today appears simple, a parking violation. Yet the report notes the vehicle was left in a restricted emergency service bay. Not a casual mistake, the type of space reserved for responders who race against minutes, sometimes seconds. Seniors in the courtroom shift uncomfortably. To them, blocking such a zone isn't a small lapse, it's disrespect toward the people who might one day save their own lives. The judge's eyes move to a second document tucked behind the first, a list of prior encounters, not crimes, but warnings. 5 instances in the last 2 years. Each one mentions the same pattern: escalating tone, dismissive comments, a habit of treating officers as inconveniences rather than authorities. Caprio reads an entry aloud, voice calm but precise. My father can make your job disappear. The room reacts with an audible inhale. Not outrage, disappointment. The kind older Americans feel when they see a young person using someone else's shadow as a shield. Artem shifts his weight, trying to look unaffected, but his fingers tap rapidly along the edge of his phone, a small betrayal of nerves. He tosses a half-smile toward the gallery, as though the report is exaggerated, a misunderstanding, something beneath him. Yet his jaw tightens every time the judge turns a page. Caprio closes the folder halfway and raises his eyes. Mr. Krylov, you came here for a parking matter, but from where I'm sitting, he taps the stack lightly, this isn't about a car, or a sign, or a yellow curb. The young man's posture stiffens, just slightly. This, the judge continues, looks like a pattern, a story you've been writing for some time. A faint rustle moves through the courtroom. The shared sensation that the foundation of the case has shifted again, pulling them deeper. Artem lifts his chin, attempting to recover the earlier arrogance. But it's too late. The room has seen the cracks, and the judge has seen enough to know today won't be about routine procedure. He sets the papers down with measured care, leans back just a fraction, and lets the silence thicken before speaking again. So, let's get to the truth of it. Judge Caprio folds his hands, his expression steady but sharpened. He studies Artem a moment longer, then asks with a measured tone, You told an officer your father could resolve the situation. Why did you say that, Mr. Krylov? The question lands like a stone. Not loud, not confrontational, but direct in a way that strips away the option of swagger. Artem responds too quickly, almost reflexively. I never said that. Caprio doesn't argue. Instead, he reaches toward the evidence tray, lifts a small audio device, and presses a button. A second later, the room fills with a young man's voice, unmistakably Artem's. I don't wait in lines. My family doesn't do lines. Call your supervisor unless you want problems. The recording crackles slightly, but every word is clear. A ripple of discomfort moves through the courtroom. Not shock, but the quiet disapproval that settles in a place where people still believe in respecting public servants. Artem's face twitches. He forces a smirk, but the edges are frayed. His hand shifts to the podium, fingers tightening, then releasing. One moment of lost control. Caprio stops the recording and sets it aside gently, almost politely. Then he asks a new question. One that comes from a different angle entirely. Mr. Krylov, Why was your car repeatedly logged near the state prosecutor's office on nights when no hearings were scheduled? The room freezes. Artem's confidence drains a shade. His posture stiffens, chest rising with a silent breath he didn't expect to need. "I live nearby," he says flatly. Before Caprio can reply, the clerk checks the residence listed on his official documents and speaks quietly. "That address is on the other side of the city, Your Honor." A heavy stillness settles. No drama. Just the dense quiet that follows a truth someone wasn't ready to meet. Artem swallows, his eyes narrow, searching for a line to lean on, but none exists. The gallery watches with a collective stillness, sensing they've crossed from arrogance into something with an entirely different weight. Caprio doesn't raise his voice. He simply leans forward slightly, elbows resting on the bench, speaking with the calm of a man accustomed to people finally running out of escape routes. "Mr. Krylov," he says, "it's starting to look like your choices are bigger than what you told this court." He slides the folder closed, not forcefully, but with finality, the kind that signals a shift from procedure to reckoning. The judge continues. "You've been circling situations that don't concern you. You've been using someone else's authority as a crutch, and now your explanations don't align." Artem inhales sharply, but stops himself from speaking. For the first time, the silence comes from uncertainty rather than disdain. Caprio studies him a moment longer, then says, "Before we go further, is there anything you'd like to clarify? This is your opportunity to tell me something I haven't yet learned from these files." The young man doesn't answer. His gaze drops to his phone again, thumb resting on the screen but unmoving, as though it might offer him a script. But the screen stays black. The courtroom senses it. The invisible line they've just crossed. This isn't about parking anymore. Not ego. Not attitude. Something else sits beneath the surface, and for the first time, even Artem seems to realize it's too deep to bluff through. Caprio lets the tension hold for a moment, then nods toward the clerk. "Proceed," he says quietly. The pause that follows feels charged, expectant, the unmistakable breath before the story changes shape entirely. A tension-filled quiet lingers as Judge Caprio studies Artem, the way someone studies a puzzle that suddenly reveals a missing piece. The young man's earlier bravado has thinned. He shifts his stance, glancing toward the exits as if calculating distances. For the first time, he looks less like a shielded son, and more like someone who realizes he may have stepped into a deeper chamber than he expected. Then the courtroom door opens, not with force, just the soft procedural push of someone arriving on business. A woman in her early 40s walks in, holding a slim folder against her chest. She wears plain office attire, neutral colors, low heels, a bag slung over one shoulder. Nothing remarkable, nothing theatrical. Yet when Artem sees her, his reaction is immediate, a sharp jolt, almost physical. His spine straightens, eyes widen for a fraction of a second, and his hand grips the edge of the podium as though he needs something solid to hold on to. The clerk checks her paperwork, confused but respectful. "She's here for a scheduled administrative testimony in another matter, Your Honor. Separate case." But the woman shakes her head gently. "Your Honor, before you move on, I need to say something." Her voice isn't loud. It isn't emotional. It carries that particular exhaustion only people who've lived too long in uneasy silence understand. Senior members of the audience lean forward. They recognize that tone instantly. Caprio turns slightly toward her. "Ma'am, if this concerns a different—" "It concerns him," she says, nodding at Artem, "and it concerns why I'm here today at all." Artem swallows hard. The room feels him tighten. The judge motions for her to step forward. She does, but with the hesitant, resigned steps of someone who didn't want this moment, who likely argued against coming, but came anyway. "When was the last time you saw Mr. Krylov?" Caprio asks. "3 months ago," she replies. "Outside the social services building downtown." She steadies her breath. "He blocked my car with his, completely. I had a client waiting. A young mother with a sick child. I asked him to move." Artem shifts, jaw clenching, but remains silent. The woman continues, eyes on the judge. "He didn't move, he laughed. Said he was there handling private matters for his father. He implied I shouldn't question him. I let it go because—" She hesitates, hands trembling slightly. "Because I didn't want trouble with a family that has people whispering about them." A murmur runs through the gallery. Not outrage, but recognition. People know what it means to avoid trouble because the wrong family might be involved. Artem finally speaks, but his voice is thin. "She's exaggerating. I never said anything about my father." The woman doesn't argue. She simply looks at the clerk. "There's a record," she says quietly. "I called the non-emergency line that night. I told the operator exactly what he said." The clerk searches, finds the entry, and prints it without comment. She hands it to Caprio. He reads it silently, then lifts his eyes to Artem. "So you did mention your father?" Artem opens his mouth, but no sound comes. His fingers twitch at his side, a trapped movement he can't disguise. Caprio leans forward with a patience that somehow feels sharper than anger. "Mr. Krylov," he says, "I don't think you walk around believing you're above the law. I think someone at home taught you to behave as if you were." The words land with the weight of truth. Not shouted, not dramatic, but undeniable. Artem's shoulders sag a fraction, the first sign of a structure beginning to crumble. The woman steps back. Relieved simply to have spoken, the audience watches, absorbing every shift, every unmasking moment. Caprio lets the silence breathe before he speaks again. Voice calm. "We're moving past the surface now, and you have a decision to make." The air feels different, not just heavy, but purposeful. The next part will decide whether Artem keeps hiding behind someone else's shadow or finally steps out of it. For a long moment, Artem stays frozen at the podium, as if his body hasn't caught up to the reality settling around him. His bravado has evaporated so completely, it feels as though another person stands in his place. Someone younger, smaller, stripped of the armor he'd been trained to wear. Judge Caprio doesn't press him. He simply waits, giving the young man the space to either shield himself further or finally speak without a script. Artem inhales sharply, then tries to force a steady voice. I didn't think any of that mattered." But the words stumble, collapsing halfway out. He grips the podium again, this time not to appear in control, but because something inside him is shaking. "I've always been told," he continues, eyes darting briefly toward the floor, "that you keep yourself above situations. Don't show weakness. Don't rely on anyone." His throat tightens mid-sentence, and he swallows as if fighting something rising in his chest. "My father would say, if you look uncertain, someone will use it against you." The courtroom remains utterly silent. People who decades ago raised their own children through hardship, war, or migration recognize the undertone. A life shaped by fear, disguised as strength. Artem's voice fractures again, quieter this time. "You think I act like this because I enjoy it? But you don't understand. If I show I messed up even once, he'll—" He pauses, searching for a safe word. "He'll make it a problem at home." Not a dramatic confession, not self-pity, just raw truth sliding out in unsteady pieces. Judge Caprio watches him with a kind of deliberate stillness, the stillness of someone who understands that forcing a young man to talk is useless, but giving him room to exhale may reveal the entire truth. Artem looks up finally, eyes glossy but unbroken. "You don't know what it's like," he says, voice cracking. "At home, you don't ask for help. You don't trust authorities. You don't apologize. You're supposed to handle things alone or you're weak." He tries to wipe his face discreetly, but the gesture betrays him. The gallery shifts, not out of sympathy alone, but with the complicated understanding mature Americans often have, recognizing someone isn't innocent, but also seeing the human damage behind their choices. Caprio leans forward slightly. When he speaks, it isn't with thunder or lecture, but grounded clarity. "Mr. Krylov, strength in this country has never meant pretending you're untouchable. It means being accountable for your own actions, standing on your own decisions, not your father's expectations." Artem blinks as if the words sting more than any rebuke. "In my courtroom," Caprio continues, "you're not judged by where you came from. You're judged by what you choose right now." The young man's shoulders slump, and this time he doesn't try to hide it. His voice thins to a single, honest thread. I don't know what the right thing is." Caprio nods, not unkindly. "That's why we're here." He lifts the file again, and the room braces for a formal ruling. A heavy fine, maybe community restrictions, something that matches the pattern. But instead, the judge closes the file softly and addresses Artem with a different tone entirely. "I'm dismissing the parking fine." A wave of surprise moves through the courtroom. Small gasps, murmurs, raised brows. Even Artem looks startled, as if he's misheard. "But," Caprio continues, "you will spend 2 hours volunteering at the Immigrant Support Center downtown. You'll sit with people who struggle every day, families who face pressure you know far too well. And you'll see how they choose responsibility instead of intimidation." Artem's lips part. Not an objection, but disbelief. This is not leniency. This is a lesson. Caprio concludes quietly, "This isn't punishment. It's direction." For the first time all morning, Artem lowers his head. Not in defiance, not in shame, but in acknowledgement. "All right," he says. A simple phrase, but it carries weight. Like the first step of someone finally turning toward daylight after too long in a shadow. The room exhales, and the story moves toward its final echo. The ruling is given, the tension breaks, and the courtroom gradually begins to return to its familiar rhythm. Papers shuffle, chairs creak, and conversations resume in cautious murmurs. But Artem doesn't move. He stands still at the podium, as if unsure how to exit a moment that reshaped him. Judge Caprio nods toward the bailiff, signaling the case is concluded. "Mr. Krylov, you're free to go." Artem hesitates before stepping away. His steps are slower, grounded, no longer the confident glide of someone who believes the world bends around him. He pushes open the wooden door into the hallway, where the courthouse air feels colder, quieter, more exposed. He's barely taken 3 steps when someone calls softly, "Artem." He turns. It's the woman from earlier. The witness whose quiet resolve dismantled the last of his defenses. She isn't angry. She isn't triumphant. Her expression holds something far heavier, a kind of tired compassion. She steps closer, stopping at a respectful distance. "I didn't say what I did today to punish you," she says gently. "I said it because someone needed to stop that path you were on. Someone needed to make you look at it." Artem's jaw tightens. He opens his mouth as if to respond, but no words arrive. For the first time, he doesn't try to charm, argue, or retreat. He just listens. The woman nods once, almost a blessing, and walks past him toward the exit, leaving a silence that feels strangely instructive. His phone buzzes. The screen glows with one word: Father. Artem stares at it. The hallway lights reflect faintly on the glass, making the name seem larger, heavier. He holds his breath. His thumb hovers over the answer button. The old reflex, the automatic obedience, the instinct to justify himself before he has even processed the moment. Then slowly, he clicks the side button and silences the call. Not out of defiance, out of need. He pockets the phone, exhaling shakily, as though releasing years of tension compacted into a single tap. Back in the courtroom, Judge Caprio is organizing his notes for the next case. The clerk, still processing the emotional weight of what unfolded, pauses and glances toward the bench. "Your Honor," she says quietly, "did you notice he didn't argue at the end? Not even a word." Caprio offers a small, almost unseen smile. "Sometimes," he replies, "people don't change because they want to. They change because for the first time, someone finally told them the truth." He flips open the next file, but doesn't begin reading just yet. There's a reflective stillness in his expression, the kind that comes from decades of seeing tough shells crack to reveal something unexpectedly human. The clerk stacks the previous case's documents, and then, almost as an afterthought, she says, "Oh, before I forget. There was a notice from security. Mr. Krylov's father submitted a request for building access next week. Something about a scheduled meeting in the city." Caprio's hand stops mid-motion. His eyebrows lift. Not in alarm, but in quiet calculation. Did he now? A low, surprised whistle escapes someone in the gallery, carried on the tail of a fading conversation. Nothing more is said, but the implication hangs in the air like a turning page. A father stepping into the city. A son taking his first step out of the shadow. And a judge who knows instinctively that stories rarely end on the day they reach his bench. The screen fades on that silent understanding. Not closure, but the promise of a deeper chapter waiting just beyond the edges of this one.